Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
Here, hanging on.
Hanging on. That's what we're all doing, just hanging on. Um, will you please tell us your name?
My name is Barbie Garayua Tudryn.
Okay, and share anything with us that'll help us get to know you a little bit better. Anything that you're comfortable with sharing with us.
Sure. I am currently a school counselor at a school in Chapel Hill. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and I came to this area around 12 years ago. And I'm a school counselor, but I'm also the founder and facilitator of Mariposas, which is a community of Latinx youth and families here in Central North Carolina. And we basically have been together for the last 7 years working around issues of intersectionality, of race, gender, and immigration. So we meet weekly. We have a bilingual children's book that's about to come out in the next few weeks. So we have a whole bunch of projects. We're very excited. So, between the counseling and Mariposas, that's the bulk of my time. I'm also a board member for Teach Intolerance, which is the educational project of the Southern Poverty Law Center. So needless to say, I'm a pretty busy person. Very busy trying to create impact in a way that I can control, right? Here locally and with students and families, and just trying to make it happen a little bit at a time, one thing at a time.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. So, tell our audience where Mariposa is. Tell us why it exists and what it does, and what is the outreach process.
So basically, Mariposa started, I think it's going to be 8 years ago. It started as an effort on my part to try to address the incredible mental health, trauma, and socio-emotional needs of Latina girls. Mm-hmm. I was one counselor in a school for 620 students. Mm-hmm. I did not have enough time in my day or capacity to be able to address the incredible needs of this community. Not only the incredible needs, but also the incredible assets that are going undiscovered. Right. So I came up with this idea to just facilitate a space where this group of girls and families could come in and they could feel a sense of collectiveness, solidarity, and a space where they could be seen as experts in their own experience, and they could capitalize from that, right? A space where I would come in as a facilitator and kind of step back and allow people to exchange experiences and ideas as a way for them to gain socio-emotional health and empowerment and agency. And also knowledge, about democratic engagement here and how critical it is for our community to be involved, both locally and nationally. So that's how it started. I started writing curriculum, and we would start meeting every week, and we would have parallel sessions. The parents would be meeting in one room, and then the girls will be meeting in the other, and then we would come together in collaborative projects. Eventually, it started after the election in 2016. Things got a little, we naturally evolved into something else. Right now, we are working a lot on democratic engagement. And by that, I mean kind of helping these families realize that even though they might not have legal citizenship, the parents, I'm talking about the parents, they do have incredible expertise in teaching civic and democratic skills to these first generation Latinx Americans, right? Which are their children. So doing a lot of discussion around race, around immigration, around the connections between the African American and Black community in the struggle and the Latinx community. We also created, as a result of the 2016 election, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of sadness, and a lot of worry. And one of the things, the great things that came out of that was, that need to really engage locally and leave national politics and worrying about things that you really cannot control most of the time, and just worrying about the local community. So after that, the community voted to start a scholarship fund for Latinx youth, knowing that the federal government, the president, was trying to dismantle DACA.
Yeah.
And the community felt like one of the most powerful ways that they could generate impact would be by funding education, which is exactly the thing that they're trying to take away from us. So they started a scholarship fund by selling tamales, and this last year, we've been giving scholarships out to CHCCS seniors. They're all first generation students. And this last year, a couple of weeks ago, actually, we gave out 4 $1,000 scholarships.
Okay.
And this is all parent and family generated, which is pretty cool.
That's wonderful. I have some more questions for you about that, but I want to take you back to what's happening at the border, where Mexican families are trying to come into America to have a better life, and they're being apprehended by border control officers and folks like that, and then separating parents from their children. What are your thoughts about that?
It's just absolutely horrifying when I think about it. I'm a highly empathetic person, and as a counselor, when I come into a relationship or into an issue, I come in first as a parent, and then I come in as a human being. So it's very easy for me to picture myself in the same situation as these people, right? Not only that, I work closely with people that did the same years ago. And I am very aware of the reasons why people in absolute desperation have to do whatever it takes to feed their children and provide them opportunity to find a good education so that they can then get ahead. So for me, when I put myself in that position, I find it absolutely appalling that we are in a moment in history where that is happening to people that want to come here to contribute and to provide better opportunities for their families. How do I know these people contribute? Because I work with these people. That's all the evidence that I need. Do you know what I mean? So it is absolutely appalling. What I know that COVID is having its own impact in detention centers and all that. I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, and there has been so much going on, and if we're not careful, that vicarious and secondary trauma that you get from watching the news and reading, we're reading about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud, and then, the images coming from the protests, and then the trauma coming in from COVID, and then our own families in my own school, everybody has different needs. I have made the conscious decision, which is, I feel terrible to try not to read what's going on at the border right now, because there's so much that my brain can take. That I think it's appalling. Absolutely, it's appalling.
It's reminiscent of slavery. So they did the same thing to slaves. They separated children from their families, husbands from their wives, and said, these supposedly are human beings who do this separation or who pull these children apart. And there's an article, I think it was written in 2014, that talked about trauma becoming a part of your genetic mechanism. So in other words, it's all throughout your DNA, that you've had so much trauma that it becomes almost a part of you that you don't even recognize. And some have argued that that's the case for white people as well, that they have some kind of trauma that they have not recognized. So that's why they behave the way they behave. But and that they must see themselves as on top as opposed to seeing themselves as equal with other ethnicities for whatever reason. So now I understand why you do, but for me, what you said earlier about Mariposa is exactly right. I have to know. I have to know what's happening in the world around me so I can make informed decisions. One of the things among the Black community that we have been, faced with for hundreds of years is the right to vote. So we do not take that lightly. You find women, old women, 80s, 90s, however, they're all trying to get to the poll and vote because we knew somebody died so we could vote, So actually having a voice in the politics of what's happening around us was really interesting. And I don't really want to go too far in this, but I will say the between Trump and Hillary, a lot of people found reasons because the advertising spin on Hillary was what a bad person she was, and so many Black people did not go out and vote because, you have the story that's being told about this woman. And I mean, I've never met her, so I don't know what kind of person she is, but I would hazard a guess she'd probably been a better president than the one we have now. Now, maybe not, but at least that's what I think, because, even with this healthcare crisis, he seems to be so resistant to saving lives. He's putting money over lives every single day. And then when you look at the border crossing situation, it brings to mind this one question for me all the time, and I'm asking you the same question. America is full of immigrants. Maybe 80-90% of people here came here for a better life. So why would you turn away a group of people who are coming seeking a better life? And I mean, to kind of, bring parity to what white people say about people coming into the country, we have rapists and murderers in every single ethnicity there is. So if one Mexican or one Korean or whatever just did a crime, that does not label the entire race. So what are your thoughts about American immigration versus whatever they're calling that they're doing at the border now? Do you think is that the same kind of immigration, or is it because it's not going through like Ellis Island or whatever we had, back then when people were trying to come into the country?
I think it's an immigration for the times we're living in globally. Like, we cannot ignore the fact that there are millions of people around the world who are getting impacted by, first of all, climate change. This is real, people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it is impacting sub-Saharan countries and countries around the equator, right, at a higher rate than anybody else. Those people, right, a lot of those people are going to be desperate to try to find, something to do. What we know is that the flow of immigration right now is not unique to the United States. This is something that is happening in Europe as well, right? So it is an immigration for the times that we're living in. Sometimes we like to go back and compare to the immigration of Ellis Island. We're living completely different times.
Yeah.
As such, there needs to be, a fair assessment of the situation. And let's try to think outside the box. The problem is, when you have these people that, like, the people that are currently in government, is just, these people are in the business of dehumanizing in order to prove their point.
Yeah.
So right off bat, we're not going to get somewhere innovative,
right?
Because I really believe they have a completely different agenda. But whoever comes after is going to have a huge challenge when it comes to immigration. We need to stop looking at immigration the way we looked at it before and realize that the planet is changing, and this is now a global issue. Right. So,
yeah. And there's a great article called The Browning and Graying of America, right? Because between the Black and the Latinx community, probably in the next 20 years, there will be parity. There will be no one group better than the other one. So there's no more white people than there are Black and brown people, And one of the things that really crosses my mind a lot and makes me think about this a lot is like, why has there been so much separation between Black and Latinx communities? Why have we done such a good job of pulling ourselves apart? You know, because the Latinx community nor the Black people can fight this as opposing forces. We need to come together as one force, with one voice, with one agenda that kind of helps people of color. Because if you look at any of these on my channel, you know, you look at these young kids who have stories to tell about what it is to be a brown person from India or from an Islam person or whatever. They're struggling too. And it seems like to me, just like what you did with Mariposa, is that we need a common connection with each other and to see each other as peers as opposed to rivals or adversaries, you know, which is what we have seen for so many years, is that, you know, the Latinx communities over here, the Black communities over here, and they're apart. I think if we are going to succeed, we do need to come together. Do you think that, do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think what we're seeing is the direct result of a failed educational system. That's what I think. When the curriculum erases the stories of Black and brown people, they're also erasing the commonalities that exist between oppressed people around the world.
Right.
So when everybody is oppressed, you know, everybody, the natural reaction, if your group is oppressed and if your group is suffering from, you know, huge violence or colonization, or everybody's fending off for themselves.
Yeah.
So it is the system itself that's creating this separation. You know, everybody's fighting for the crumbs.
Right.
And
Exactly.
for me, the solution begins with the little ones.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. How do we teach the little ones that they have more in common, our Black and brown little ones, because of the history of colonization in this planet, because of the history of genocide, because of the history of enslavement in this planet? We all have, unfortunately and terribly, that in common.
Yeah.
And from that history, there's tons of stories of resilience, tons of stories of innovation by people that were oppressed, right? And that lived in a system of subjugation. Why can't we tell those stories? If we started really integrating that into the curriculum in the schools, these kids are going to start seeing commonalities. One of the things that that I read, it's been 4 months of a lot of reading for me here at home and working and all that, but one of the most beautiful things that I read, and I don't have a name or I don't remember, but the idea of what I read was Latinx people in this country owe a lot to the African American community in this country. And I'm not saying only, I want to include also other marginalized groups.
Yeah.
Why? Why? Because a lot of the rights that we have today were fought by the African American community and by the Black community, right? We have the civil rights legislation. We have, you know, Brown versus Board,
Yep.
right? So there is a lot, and this is some of the work that I try to do in Mariposas, is expose the kids and the families to this history, right? So that they learn that, hey, you know, when they're in their community, because there is, I mean, I agree with you, there is conflict between both communities. But when they go out into their community and they see a Black person, or, you know, they're humanizing their story. They're saying, hey, wait a minute. They have a lot in common with me.
Yeah.
History is evidence that that is true.
Absolutely.
I mean, but it needs to start early.
It needs to start early. I always believe that prejudice and the lack of prejudice all begins at home. Because if in your home, your family members are using words that are degrading to other people, it becomes a part of who you are. Although you may not say the word, you understand why, or the context in which the person said the word. I agree with you completely that, you know, one of the things, and I think one other group that really needs some credit here is Native Americans, right? So they were here before anyone else came. And what really is so appalling about that is that when the first people came and encountered Native Americans, the Native Americans tried to help them live and survive and deal with a planet that was not as well developed as it is today. And eventually they end up being moved off the land that they had lived in for generations. You know, they've lived and supported the land. They weren't killing animals, slaughtering animals just for sport. You know, they only killed to eat, you know. And so you get to this place where you are in this country, and everything that is not white for some reason is subject to dehumanization, period. You know, in our institutions, so maybe in elementary school, there is diversity in terms of faculty and students, but when you get past elementary school to post-secondary school, you know, you get a separation again. You may have a sprinkle of Black, Latinx, Islam, whatever you have there. And even in those communities, those people are self-reliant. They're relying on themselves, not coming together to see the commonalities between the Black, brown, Islam, Jewish, whatever it is, as a commonality, because those that believe that there is something called white privilege or white power really does see anybody that's not them as an enemy. And so they become easily a target. So, you know, I really hope your work does, you know, bring about change between these two communities. The problem is there's a lot of Black groups that are doing things. I just don't know how do we intersect? You know, where do we come together so that we see, so are there Black people in Mariposa, or if there's another group or people from that group there, you know? And so those are the kind of things that to me seems to need to happen in order for us to get to
they need to happen. I agree with you. I wanted to say something else about Indigenous people, and you know, again, another commonality between the three groups, you know, is this idea of forced migration, right? Of course, Latinx, you know, have their own complexities with the stories, you know, of immigration. African Americans, the forced Great Migration of the end of Reconstruction up until the 1950s and 60s, right? This is something that I touched on with the Mariposas girls, and they were completely blown away that this happened, right? But does school teach this at all? Does school make the connection between one and the other and about the forced movement, violent, genocidal movement of Indigenous people in this country? No. They may teach it, but they teach it in silos.
Yeah.
And as side notes.
Yeah. What you get is the Trail of Tears. That's what you hear more about, the Trail of Tears. And not all that happened before that, but you get the Trail of Tears.
What needs to happen is it needs to be taught and connected as part of a more dangerous, intentional, harmful pattern of oppression and violence as a result of white supremacy. Until we do that, we'll continue to have that separation of the groups. In terms of the collaboration between Latinx groups and African American Black groups, we did a collaboration. I agree with you 100%. We did a collaboration this year between Mariposas and a group, an African American Black Afro-descendant group in our school, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I mean, we brought the kids together. We were gonna go meet an author, a children's book author, African American woman, and usually when we're gonna meet famous people, I usually create a curriculum where we teach prior to meeting the person, you know, the context in which the person works, and we try to extract, you know, all of the lessons about that person's life in order to get the kids ready to visit that person. We did the same thing when we went to meet with Sonia Sotomayor in the Supreme Court, did the same thing when we went to meet with Ricky Martin, and when we went to meet with Soledad O'Brien, among other people. So for this author, African American author, you know, we brought together the two groups. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. What was significant for me to see was when these beautiful Black girls came into this environment of 40 Latinx students from elementary all the way to college, right? It's not easy coming to that.
Right.
They came through that door. We always start our meetings in a big circle. And they joined the circle, and they did not only join the circle, they took over.
Yeah.
They owned their space.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they owned their space was the wisdom that these girls were sharing was the wisdom of stories told to them of their reality. And I knew at that minute that this is something that needs to definitely continue.
Yeah.
Because these girls were ready,
yeah,
you know, for these type of conversations. Now, one thing we need that's going to be a challenge before we do that is to create the environment for them to be able to receive each other's stories and honor each other's stories and find solidarity in them. How do we do that? By addressing the gaps that the curriculum has, the huge gaps. If we bring them together, in my opinion, without that historical context in place, it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I think too that, you know, like in the Black community, there was dissension among Blacks, right? You know, so Jim Crow was such an excellent tool. It separated us by skin color. And I remember, I think I talked to another fellow who was Puerto Rican not too long ago. And I remember there was a movie that came on. It was a long time ago called "What Color Is Your Abuelo?" You know, like the skin color matters. You know, so there are all these obstacles that we've got to get past in order to get to commonalities with each other, but even commonalities in our own communities, right? So if you're lighter, you're better than if you're darker, if your hair's straight, you know, and all of these things, people allow these constructs to shape their behaviors and their thoughts and their actions, which is insane to me. You know, I mean, like, how is that possible? You know, that you care about something that the minute you die, your skin falls off. Why the hell does it matter? Your hair falls out. Why does this matter? So I don't know. I really do
White
think
supremacy, that's what it is. You know, the closer you are to the white ideal, the perception is that you're going to be more successful. You're going to be better. You're going to meet that ideal of whiteness, which has been drilled into everybody's heads for centuries now. You know, and colorism is something that impacts all of our communities. I mean, in Puerto Rico, forget it. I mean, wow. There are people not only in Puerto Rico, but all over Latin America that are convinced that this doesn't exist.
Right. Yep. I have friends from Brazil and Colombia, and I have this conversation with them all the time. You know, they care about the lighter you are. If you're Brazilian, you're Brazilian. What the hell difference does it make what color you are? If you're Colombian, you're Colombian. Why does the shade of your skin matter? But I think what you said is absolutely correct. We've been taught that for so long that we can't help but believe anything but that.
It's the racial construct, you know, and it's and this is the part that's kind of difficult sometimes for me to understand. And I wish somebody could come and help me sort my ideas around this and my wonderings, is this idea of, you know, how do we move forward from this, from the racial construct, knowing that the racial construct was created to oppress and to build wealth, and knowing that, and knowing it's not real, because from science we know that humans are 99% the same.
Regardless of their skin color.
How do we start teaching children that we're kind of 99% the same?
Right.
At the same time that we don't perpetuate the racial construct. Does that make sense? But we need to consider the racial construct because it's in everything that we do. Right. So if we say, no, I'm not going to see race because it's a construct, we're also ignoring that reality is that all of society is built around race. So that's, I mean, if there's anybody out there that can help me understand how we're going to move forward, then I'd be very, or if you have a book or something that talks about this.
We'll talk further at a later time. We have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to leave you the last 5 minutes to talk about whatever you wish to talk about. And as I said earlier, once this is converted, I'll send you a link so you can watch it and let me know if we can update it, upload it.
So You know, interestingly, before our call, I was working, there's going to be a webinar I'm going to be part of in August with Teach Intolerance. And the topic of the webinar is, you know, addressing trauma and student relationships, you know, in this very confusing, you know, year of COVID and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and the election. And needless to say, in education is going to be a very interesting year, never mind very interesting semester. So what I'm thinking is, at this moment, I would like to encourage all educators to really take a look at their traditional system of approaching their classrooms and see this moment in time as an opportunity to flip their structure upside down, to center the voices and experiences of students. I've had a lot of questions from educators telling me, you know, I don't know what I'm gonna do. These kids are gonna come back to us traumatized. There's been so much going on. What do I do? Well, if you center on the voices and experiences of the students and their families, you cannot go wrong.
Right.
This year, in my opinion, this year is all about mental health, socio-emotional support. Academics should come second. So this year should be all about providing opportunities for students to center on their voice and experiences in order to address all of the trauma that they're going to be coming back with, and all of the trauma that's coming because the election is coming and things are going to start intensifying even more. And from what it looks like, COVID is also going to start intensifying even more. So to get these kids to build their resiliency, but using their voice and experiences as the center of all that. If you integrate socio-emotional learning into your academic curriculum, you are able to address that trauma with the students, to get them to start healing a little bit, you know, and get those, the trauma kind of start growing those scabs a little bit and get them ready for what's coming. Because I do think there's more coming. I also think that this is an amazing generation. Is it Gen Z? I think it's Gen Z.
Yeah.
I think these are amazing kids, as we're seeing. I mean, look at the change they have generated in just the last month in this country without leadership. There's no defined leadership. And these groups of kids have been protesting all over the country, and they're getting corporations, organizations, governments to change policies that we never would have thought would get changed. Let's start just with the statues. Who would have thought that here in North Carolina, the governor was actually gonna voluntarily take down the statues, and that's the end. That's it. Why couldn't that have happened last year or in the last 3 years where we've been fighting for this? Anyway, but it's youth generated. I feel very hopeful, but we also need to help them heal. I think that's our responsibility as the older generations, is to help them heal and help them develop those skills even more so that they can continue generating change.
I think this is absolutely a wonderful talk. I can't wait till you say we can upload it, because I think people need to hear it. And I think we should do it again and again and again, because there's so many other things to talk about. We need to talk about
Sure.
we need to talk about, you know, like, you know, what is education? Because, you know, even in a school system, teachers do not have enough power to, you know, they must adhere to the curriculum that's coming from the state or whoever has the curriculum. So how do they flip this over? So I promise you, we will do this a couple, 3 more times until we can have these discussions and get other people to join us in this. So thank you very much for talking. Stay safe, and you should get this video probably within an hour. Okay.
Good to see you.
Very good to see you too. Thank you very much.